I'm gonna ask the most stereotypical question that everyone is who watching this or listening is curious. Have you been in a White House?
I have.
Tell us everything.
People here might know the American TV show, the pretty iconic political drama called The West Wing. That describes
right,
a wing of the White House where the president's
okay.
office sits and the chief of staff and all that.
Right, that's the West
East Wing
Wing.
is the first lady's office. U.S. bureaucracy is huge. Like there's federal government, which we discussed. There's state government, there's city government. Like all levels of government have all different functions.
You think that Trump administration now will make any difference, or you think there's not much chance to it?
There's a lot of reasons why I can relate to somebody like Kamala Harris.
Let's say you found an Asian American Jews, right?
The closest statistical estimate I have is not a very good one, but the latest study about Jews of color say that there are about 1 million Jews of color, and about 14% of them are Asian in the United States. So that means there's at least 140,000 adult Asian Jews out there, which is kind of mind-blowing. You know, so I was raised very Chinese. Honestly, I was acculturated to China. I really knew nothing almost of Jewish anything, because my dad, he was raised conservative Jewish, which is like a kind of more traditional but not super branch of Judaism. So like,
was it harder to explain to Chinese people that you're Jewish, or when you were in America already that you're Jewish?
You're really
or
good at
Chinese?
I think Chinese people largely had a very positive reaction. They'd be like, "Oh, Jewish people are so smart, so good at business. Oh my god!" They love Jews.
Did you feel like you have to sacrifice a lot to adapt to the new environment in America?
There were some small things I didn't understand, like how does a pencil sharpener, like the ones that are stuck to the walls in the classroom, instead of the ones that you hold work, like the electric ones.
Right.
How does school lunch work? How does break, tutorial, like random like school stuff. I was like, this is different from China. Yeah, civilization has to continue. Doesn't mean I have to be the one to continue it.
Hello everyone to who's listening. I'm thrilled to be joined by our amazing guest today, Jen. Would you like us to tell something about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey everyone, my name is Jen. I'm an organizer and a writer. I historically have worked in politics for the last 8-ish years doing all different kinds of things. So that's kind of one of the things that's going to come up today. I'm mixed race. My mom is from Chengdu. My dad is from the state of Maine in the United States. And I grew up partly here in Guangzhou and partly in California.
That sounds pretty cool. I also watched Lunar, the Jewish Asian film project, where you're trying to create this sense of community and build more bridges between people of mixed blood, especially Asian American Jews. Can you tell us more about Lunar, what that project is, and what actually inspires you to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I'm the co-creator and producer of Lunar, the Jewish Asian film project. It is an 11-episode docu-series featuring 23 Asian American Jews telling their stories of identity and heritage in their own words. It was created in 2020. It was kind of like a time of isolation, and I had a lot of just free time on my hands, so I was thinking a lot about myself, you know, and my identity and who I am and all that good
It always
stuff.
happens when you have a lot of free time, right? And these kind of thoughts are started coming to your head.
Precisely. Yeah. And so I was reflecting on my journey as a mixed person over the last number of years, where I had gotten to connect with other mixed race individuals for the first time really seriously in college. And I also had met a lot of Jews of color, but I hadn't necessarily really put together that intersection of like being an Asian American person and a Jewish person. Like I knew a bunch like of Asian American Jews just from my community, but we never really talked about it like together.
Thought about it as a community as a whole, and actually it can be a thing.
Absolutely. We all kind of thought we were the only ones growing up. Like I didn't know any other Asian Jews. So as soon as I started thinking, oh, who else do I know as an Asian Jew? A bunch of names came up and I was like, okay, this could work.
And you just contacted those people, what, direct on the internet?
Yes, but yes and no, so not exactly. I started out with somebody named Jenny Rudolph. She is the co-creator, and she currently still is one of the 2 co-executive directors of the organization that came out of the project. We had met kind of on the internet. There's remember, I don't know if this was a thing in like internet subculture here, but during COVID, a bunch of subcultural identity groups popped up
I
on
remember the
American
time
social
for sure.
media.
Yeah, I remember the time.
Yeah,
I think there was a time for a lot of people who start thinking about who they are, and you know, when you're
Yes.
getting less work and a lot of free time, that's where you have this energy for.
and your way of life completely changes overnight from you're going out and doing all these things and being social and hitting all these spots, and all of a sudden you're stuck at home. So there's a fundamental change of structure in your life such that your rhythm's different and you're kind of disrupted in a way that makes you kind of crack open these things that may not otherwise emerge.
Right. I think especially when you're living in the normal time, when you have work and everything, you don't have time to think about it. What your focus is, okay, I need to get my food ready, I need to get to the
Yes.
work, I need to meet my friends, I need to get rest, I need to get sleep, and then you go through the circle over and over again. But as soon as you have more free time, that's I think it's very important to meditate and take vacation sometimes,
Yeah,
because
I'm
there's
on
a good
vacation
saying,
right now.
people who don't know how to take rest, they don't know how to work. I really believe in it.
Absolutely. Totally. So what did you think about during COVID then, Jay?
Oh, you mean, my own thoughts?
Yeah, what did your self-reflection journey bring about?
I definitely came up to the idea that I'm missing my friends and that I'm a very social person. I haven't thought about it before as much, but when I got rid of it and when there was a lack of this communication, especially with my close people, I understood how much I actually miss them and how do I really need the real interaction and the real communication, because all the Zooms and phone calls, this all fun.
Yeah.
We were playing games, we were singing music, whatever we were doing, but it was not the same as when I'm actually interacting and communicating with someone in person, like we're doing now, for example.
Totally. I
So
completely agree.
with Lunar, okay, so you were reflecting and you contact some people. You said something about Jenny.
Yeah, so I talked to Jenny like a few times in the comment section of a group called Subtle Mixed Traits.
Okay.
It's a spin-off of Subtle Asian Traits. These are all just like social media subcultures that emerged, right? And so I remembered, Jenny is also Chinese and Jewish. Let me go and see if she wants to be a part of something. Initially, I just thought, let's get everybody together, have a quick conversation, maybe an hour or so, and record it. I wasn't thinking that big because I have no film background, like literally none. Like,
how many people joined for the first this as a Zoom call, right?
yeah, we kept it really small. We didn't want it to be too many, so we only recruited myself, Jenny, and 3 other people. And it was 2 hours instead of 1, and there was a lot to talk about, and we all came away with the sense of like just community, right? Like being seen.
So when you realized, okay, then we can take it further, was it right after that meeting? And then you
Yeah.
thought, okay, we're gonna start recording, making those sort of interviews that you did, and then try to combine them all together to share the experience of all these Asian American Jews that you met and that you found.
Yeah, so actually, one of the people who initially joined the 5-person people conversation, she worked at a funding organization, like a grant making group called the Jews of Color Initiative. And she recommended myself and Jenny for a small grant with that organization if we were to make a longer docuseries that wasn't just covering Chinese Jews, but Asian American Jews at large. So we were thrilled to accept that opportunity, and we then recruited 23 people in total and interviewed them in groups of 4 to 5, cut up that footage into these 11 episodes with different themes, and they were a niche hit. They weren't like internet viral famous, but within the Jewish community, they really raised awareness and people's consciousness that this Asian American Jewish subsection exists, that it's worthy of attention.
What's happening with the project now?
Yeah.
Do you think the project reached the expectations or overexceeded, or what's going on with it?
It absolutely exceeded. I mean, come on, it absolutely exceeded the like we could not have dreamed. Like we thought, okay, there's maybe like 3 other people like us. Turns out, like the closest like statistical estimate I have is not a very good one, but the latest study about Jews of color say that there are about 1 million Jews of color, and about 14% of them are Asian in the United States. So that means there's at least 140,000 adult Asian Jews out there, which is kind of mind-blowing, you know? So we thought like a few people, like our friends and family, were going to watch our videos, but then somehow 50,000 people did, and we were like, oh, wow, like this is
Okay.
awesome.
Yeah.
Like there was this like rush of energy of discovering not only that we found each other, but that other people saw who we were too.
I'm curious, when I was watching those videos, my biggest question is, do you think a content like that, don't you afraid it can create more separation than actually integration? Because if let's say you found an Asian American Jews, right? And I'm
Mm-hmm.
pretty sure there's a lot of different groups that
Yeah.
exist. I'm probably sure it's an infinite number, right?
Mm-hmm.
We
Like
can talk about
subgroups. Yeah.
Russian, Koreans, Indian, Australians. So
That's
there's
a good point.
an infinite number.
Yes.
So were you afraid that this can actually separate people from others, or have this idea ever thought to your head?
That's a really good question. I've vaguely thought about it, but honestly, not so much. At the time, we were just so thrilled to discover that there were others like us that we didn't think, oh, does that mean that we're taking this like niche on niche on niche community and taking it away from the broader Asian or Jewish like communities? We didn't think that far really because part of our experience collectively as a group was sort of not being accepted by or being gate kept from those larger communities to which we belong. So we thought this is great to have this niche. We didn't mean for it to be like once you're an Asian Jew,
we're a separate group or something like that.
yeah, like I still participate very much so in the Jewish community and the Asian American community and larger communities of color in the United States. Like I still see myself as a important member of those groups. I just like that I can return to this like sense of home and belonging with these other Asian Jews, you know?
What's happening with this project now? Like, are they still filming? Because as you said, you're not a part of filming anymore. Is it still going the same way? How is you still related to it?
Yeah, I'm like a member. Like I participate. Okay. So basically, after we did the series, the 2 seasons of the series, the 11 episodes, there was a bit of a leadership transition. I stepped away from the leadership to pursue another opportunity in DC. And they kind of, at the time we were kind of discussing this, but after I left, they finalized the decision to step away from the films and focus more on building the community and offering events and programs for Asian American Jews across a couple of US cities.
That sounds cool. Yeah, events is especially I think after COVID, that's what I also have. What I mentioned, when people from Zoom actually moved to meeting people in real life.
Precisely,
and events are a great way to do that.
Exactly.
And you, what's about your story? So you grew up here up until 15 years old, and then you moved to US.
Pretty much, yeah. It was like July of 2014. So I was about to turn 15, but I was 14. Who cares?
Okay. How it felt? So it turns out that when you grew up, you try to get all these people together. But what about your own experience when you were growing up, living in a Chinese Jewish family? Was it a very clear cultural belonging for you? So you clearly understand that, okay, this is 2 cultures that I'm exist in, or did it dilute the sense of that you were getting actually
Yeah, this is, I'm sure you also understand
based
on your background.
That's why I'm asking, because I'm also from the diverse cultural background, and and I also grew up in this different country where my parents from 2 other countries, and it was not for a long time. It was not, I can't say it was hard for me, but it was one moment when you start asking yourself, especially as the child who growing up, you start asking you all these questions. How was that experience for you? Were your parents trying to teach you more of local values, or trying to balance it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was raised very Chinese. Honestly, I was acculturated to China. I really knew nothing almost of Jewish anything, because my dad, he was raised conservative Jewish, which is like a kind of more traditional but not super branch of Judaism. We don't need to go into it, but basically he was raised religious, and he abandoned his Judaism pretty much. He stopped practicing when he moved to Asia, which was when, I don't know, he was in his late 20s. So by the time I was born, he was kind of like, Judaism, who?
Yeah.
So Judaism was like nothing, but Jewishness to me was like, he had pickles and gefilte fish, like in the like food, like a few food things that he would kind of have quirks that other American dads like didn't eat those things. Or honestly, a lot of times it was people bringing up that I'm Jewish and not me actively telling people. Like, I guess people in my neighborhood all kind of knew I was Jewish. So sometimes teachers will be like, "Oh, you're so smart. It's
You
because
mean
you're
already
Jewish."
in America or,
No,
or here?
here. Yeah, like, you walking around a mixed kid in the early 2000s, not that many. People are going to ask your background. So my mom would just like explain. So like,
Was it harder to explain to Chinese people that you're Jewish, or when you were in America already that you're Jewish
you're really
or
good at asking
Chinese?
questions. This is probably the latter. I think Chinese people largely had a very positive reaction. They'd be like, "Oh, Jewish people are so smart, so good at business. Oh my god!" They love Jews. They love, like, it's called philo-Semitism, actually, I think, or philo-Semitism.
Okay.
This like affinity towards Jews that's not founded on fact. It's just kind of like a positive stereotype almost. But in the US, actually, like, Jews of color, not just Chinese Jews or Asian Jews, face a lot of racism and rejection by the Jewish community. And it's very common for them to get asked, like, "What are you doing here?" Like, the question I always get is like,
But why? If it's still, because you still, and also I think, is it, I might get it wrong, but is it like in Jewish community, they actually treating it by the father's blood?
It's
No?
my mom, yeah.
Oh, no, they are the opposite actually. They treating by the mother. So they think the mother's blood is the main
Yeah,
one.
so that's one of the reasons why I've been rejected by certain denominations of Judaism, is that my mother is never converted to Judaism.
Right.
So my dad is the lineage that I have. So
you said about positive stereotypes. What was the negative stereotypes that you met in the US?
About Jews or about?
Yes, about Jews, because you were saying that you were not getting accepted by the Jewish community.
Yeah. So you're asking then what negative stereotypes Jewish people had about Chinese people?
Yeah. So that, I mean, what was the reason? They're saying that, oh, if your both parents are not Jews, then we're not accepting you. But
yeah, that's one of the reasons. And then it's a lot of like, I've never heard of this before. Like, what's an Asian Jew? You couldn't exist, possibly. Whoa, what the hell? What the heck?
So you haven't been here since, you said you moved to US when you were 15, and then you visited for a while in 2017. But still, this trip back to China from US was very personal and emotional for you. What was your expectations from being back home? Reconnecting with your roots, I guess that's was the initial purpose.
Yeah, my roots, the people that I grew up around, my family, my friends, my life here.
Do you feel like you fulfilled it? Yes.
I think I have. How do I say this?
It's
Living in the US, it was starting to feel like my being Chinese was a coincidence. It was incidental to my life. It wasn't like I had maybe one serious touch point with Chinese identity. I volunteered with a Chinese American group in San Francisco. So that was the only opportunity, like an organized opportunity, where I really interacted with Chinese people and spoke Chinese. Otherwise, like, my friend circle, it's pretty diverse. There are a lot of Asian Americans and Chinese Americans, but it's happenstance, and most of us don't speak to each other in Chinese. And the only person where I would like semi-regularly speak Chinese to is my mother, right? And we don't talk that often. Blasphemous, I know. But so like Jewishness, though, is like front and center to my life. You know, my work has to do with religion to some extent. I go to a synagogue. I go to a lot of random Jewish holiday events and like social circles. A lot of my friends are Jewish, and I've really explored and strengthened that part of my identity. So honestly, like, I felt out of touch. I barely ever cook Chinese food. Like, I just felt my Chinese was really getting horrendous.
That's why now you're so excited to speak Chinese. Now I understand it. Okay,
that's why I was talking to, like, you know, your staff and your team in Chinese, because I can.
Right. Now I can. Now, actually, I'm really glad that you brought it up, because now I can understand actually how important it can be for someone who lives so far away. You know, getting this little piece of yourself back, and understanding where you're actually from. It is very important to remember your roots,
and feeling like I haven't lost it, that I can get it back, that I can speak Chinese fluently and express my thoughts. There's a significant difference in how efficiently I can express my thoughts in the languages. I think if you have a 5-hour conversation with me in English versus Mandarin, you'd probably get to know me better in the English
I
conversation.
hope I can be able to have a 5-hour conversation in Mandarin one day, but
I think you can get there.
Let's hope for that.
If you put your mind to it, I think you can.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I believe if you put your mind in something, you always can get it.
Definitely.
Would you say that American-born Chinese and the Chinese people you met here now when you're back, would you say it's a big cultural gap? Would you say it's a gap, I mean, in terms of difference? Because I give you an example. When I was in Australia, right, I of course tried to find the Russian community, but what happened is I realized that the Russian community and I heard that in US is the same thing. It is the Russian community that actually existed in Russia 30 or 40 years ago. This is not the current thing that actually representing this culture. And I've never been to US, so I'm curious. Did you felt the difference, or you would say that the Chinese Americans are still living by the same traditions and the same roots, and being back here, you actually it's the same thing, or you felt different?
So I thought it was going to be a larger difference, but it's not as much as I thought. The difference isn't so much in like lifestyle and values. I think it's
what's the difference? What's the difference in the lifestyle, for example?
It's hard to describe, really. It's because Chinese America is hard to define, and so is China.
Okay.
There's regionality. There's your upbringing and your tradition. Like there's Chinese Americans whose great grandparents came here during the paper sun era, where you had to get your papers from somebody else because there was the Chinese Exclusion Act. Mm-hmm. There's people whose families came all the way in the 1800s to build the railroad, and then there's Taiwanese immigrants who came after the Immigration and Nationalities Act. And oh my God, so much U.S. legislation. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
That's professional. It's all right.
I was not sure how. Okay, let me. Sorry, let me. Okay. Let me try to make it. So in like the 1960s, there was a law that repealed earlier legislation that restricted immigration based on certain nationalities. So there was an influx of highly skilled immigrants from East Asian countries, and that included, to some extent, not really China. And like a lot of Taiwanese people came during that time. And then afterwards, like 90s on, a lot of recent Chinese immigrants. So like the Chinese diaspora, and then of course there's the larger Chinese-speaking world, like Malaysia and stuff.
Mm-hmm,
so you meet 3 Chinese people, you put them together in San Francisco. They're going to speak a different language. They're going to have a different set of references. They're going to have different cultural upbringings, and they may not really translate to or agree with each other.
Sort of things.
So it's hard for me to say like, this is the typical Chinese American. Okay, this is typical Chinese, and how do they like, strictly compared to each other.
Inside that group, it is also very diverse.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, like I expected sort of less progressiveness in China than I got. I was surprised to hear.
Why? Was it influenced by the media? Was it influenced
by my mom, really, I think.
Oh, really?
Like my mom, what you talked about is like an immigrant, when they leave a country, they retain that version of the country. They don't progress with the country. So I left 10 years ago. So the 10 years ago, the China that I left is maybe not so accepting of certain things, right?
So your mom was still teaching you of the same way that the China that existed at that period, rather than actually it's happening now.
To some extent, and she's representing her generation. Mm-hmm. I fell out of touch with people of my generation who came of age in the last 10 years in a different China. I did that process of coming of age and growing into my values and who I am in the US. So what that then reflects is like who I am is reflective of what's happened in the US in the last 10 years, really, more than China, right? So
I'm really glad that you came. I'm really glad that you came and updated your information. It is important. It is important.
I mean,
because now, even if you go back, you will be able to bring in new perspective, and then I guess that's how this cultural life circle is just keep moving.
Yeah, like I used to really experience being Chinese and a woman as oppression, as repression almost. Like I didn't have sexual freedoms. I didn't have gender related freedoms. I had to follow a traditional template of get married, have children,
Can you extend on that? So that's your experience in America,
No, growing up in China,
growing up here.
I felt that gender expectations were very strict and very
Okay.
oppressive and patriarchal. I felt like I was expected to perform a certain standard of femininity, in that for me, an accomplishment would be to marry well and have children, and not necessarily to pursue, like, there's these ideas still exist to some extent, but back then I think they were more, they were met with less objection and met with more seriousness. There were ideas around, like, if you're over 30 and you're not married, and if you're, you're a woman and you got a PhD, right? Like, I just felt like there were much more rigid definitions of, like, a woman should blah blah blah, and especially like around sexuality, what a woman is entitled to in terms of pleasure and self-exploration, like that kind of thing felt really predefined and predetermined for me as the limits of such things in Chinese society.
So do you think we should have those standards, or you think we don't? But what is the purpose of us is being here if not to create next life?
So are you specifically talking about children?
I'm specifically talking about children because you said the expectation for me as the woman is to have a family and have children. And again, I understand if you're putting it to the more traditional perspective. I'm not saying if you're a woman, you have to be a housewife. But exactly the having children topic is always interesting me, because women are the only people in this world who can have children. So don't you think I'm not saying it's the only or I wouldn't say the only, but I would say it is one of the main purposes. Yes, create the new life.
Yeah, civilization has to continue. Doesn't mean I have to be the one to continue it.
Okay. Do you think it's a selfish approach? If you're
Maybe.
saying that, so you're saying I'm not going to be a part of the society that is growing, but I'm going to focus more on my inner
Not
self.
exactly. There's more nuance than that. I'm not saying I don't want kids. I think I'm 25. I don't know what I want.
Okay.
I think there's so much uncertainty in your 20s that it's hard for me to say, yes, I want kids. No, I don't. I used to be very absolute and being like, I'm not going to have children. F that. But
now you're saying it is a possibility.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just think that and I feel like maybe this is an American way of thinking about it. I'm not quite sure where this comes from, but if I'm going to have a kid, I want to make sure that that the kid is going to grow up with some security and a sense of just strength from their family, and not just like be kind of floating, Like I want to give my children every opportunity.
Of course.
And I want to be prepared before I make that choice.
I'm always getting fascinated how people had children before, because seems like there was not that much requirement of having that much wealth. But still, they were able to do that. Our parents were able to do that. That's why, again, I'm not saying that if you have $1 million debt, you should have children. You obviously have to be financially stable. But if you cannot afford the best university in the world, if you cannot buy everything to your child, it's all right. You can teach your children good values, and there will be enough for them to grow up decent people.
Yeah, I agree. But I do think there's a factor of like some people inherently want to be parents. Like, I don't know whether it's like conditioning of traditional values or what it is, but I know some girls who like have known they wanted to be moms since they were like 7. It's part of their identity to like pursue motherhood, but I've never had that instinct just so early on in life that I feel it is pretty important for me to feel like mentally ready. Not even that I need to have the best financial circumstances for my child. Like my parents had that mindset where they wanted me to go to the best schools, and I did go to a pretty damn good school. Like I achieved whatever American dream.
Which school did you go to?
Well, I went to a small university. You maybe haven't heard of it, on the east side of the San Francisco Bay. Okay. It's nestled in this small town north of Oakland.
You just said pretty damn good, so that's what I'm asking.
I'm doing the thing in the U.S. where kids who went to like Ivy League schools are super low key, and they're like, oh, I went to this small town in Connecticut, and they really just mean Yale.
Right.
I went to the University of California at Berkeley. So that is a decent school. It's like top 25, but it's not Stanford, which is the other side of the bay. It's an hour drive from us.
So you were saying that you didn't feel this motherhood from the young age, but you did say that it's probably developing.
Probably. I think a lot about how to pass on culture and language to my children if I were to have them. Like, I had a partner who is Mexican, and we just like an immigrant from Mexico, and we discussed like what, like, you know,
how does this all gonna work?
Yeah, right. Like, actually, I don't know if we explicitly discussed it, but it crossed my mind a number of times. Like, not even because we were at that stage where that was going to be a serious consideration, but every time I have a new like dating prospect, I'm always like, damn, how's my kid going to be mixed?
You know, I'm very, very on the same page with you here, because we just talked about being culturally mixed. And I was also thinking, wow, but my kids, that's going to be next level of whatever is happening to me. That's going to be the next level. Yeah, but that's the beauty, right? I think that's how the world, I don't think it's something new, actually. I think it was always happening throughout human history. It's just we are at this point where we see these kind of nations. We think, but these nations were also developed because people were migrating and mixing and everything.
Then the idea of modern nation states were not created until a few centuries ago. Like the way that our borders are constructed, the way that we separate our national identities, that's all not like thousands of years old, you know?
Right.
As you know.
Talking a little bit more about your American experience.
Let's go.
When you moved there as a teenager, right? At the age of 15, did you feel like you have to sacrifice a lot to adapt to the new environment in America? Or was it a smooth transition for you?
Relatively speaking, for me, it was probably smoother than it would have been for a lot of other people.
Why?
U.S. citizenship, American dad, fluent English. I even tested into like the good English class, like the advanced English class. Like, I couldn't do math in English, but I could do English in English, which was shocking. I was like, wow, do you guys really not teach English here that I can be? Okay. I was just like, so, I mean, there were some small things I didn't understand, like how does a pencil sharpener, like the ones that are stuck to the walls in the classroom, instead of the ones that you hold, work, like the electric ones. Right. How does school lunch work? How does break, tutorial, like random like school stuff? I was like, this is different from China.
What was the experience here?
It's more longer school days, really. School lunches are a little better.
Okay. What about in terms of, do you remember anything about studying hours? Was it I guess the study load here was more? Way more. Okay.
A lot more pressure, a lot more challenging material, more advanced math and sciences. The one big difference is that at my school here, they published everybody's grades and ranked you. But in the US, they don't publicly rank the kids in that way. So,
but do you think ranking is a good thing? You think it brings a sense of competition, right?
I don't necessarily. I mean, depends on your philosophy, underlying goals, right?
Okay.
If your goal is to motivate the kids to compete with each other such that you get the best grades overall, yeah. But then,
I mean, the goal of education is everyone to learn. I think that's the underlying basic. The
thing is
goal.
that kids are going to have different strength. You know, some kids may not be like super conventionally academically strong, but they may be really good at music or creative arts. Like, I didn't think that the Chinese educational system under which I grew up really encouraged that kind of multifaceted thinking about talent. I thought it really pushed the traditional like scholarly talent to an extent that was maybe not beneficial to children who had different learning abilities or different interests.
I actually think that now China really represents this sort of balance, you know, yin yang, because from one side you have this extraordinary competition, so people do need to follow the rules and in terms of education. However, you still need to stick out from the crowd. You still need to have ideas that are different from others in order to stick out.
Yeah, that's different from how I experienced growing up. I experienced learning as pattern recognition and memory. I didn't really think about, I wasn't really encouraged much to analyze and think like, what's your interpretation of the material? How will you integrate this material into your learning? The you didn't occur much to me, at least on the Chinese side of my education, because I went to a bilingual like school program.
Okay, and your experience in American school, you saying it was more focused on individual.
To some extent, yes.
Okay.
There were still standards and curricula. You know, I went to a pretty decent public school in California, which has a very unequal public education system. There are really bad schools and really good schools. I went to a middling school pretty much, and there were lots of AP classes, lots of really smart, high-achieving kids. So I felt like I was able to push myself to go towards that route, but also great access to creative arts. I started doing drama. I learned like dramaturgy. It's like when you write background for dramas.
Okay. Oh, it's like a
Dramaturg.
setup, like a dramaturg. Okay,
It's like you write the historical context
more
for
language. Okay.
I did drama critiques. I did directing. I acted. Like I learned the whole world of theater, which was, you know, which was important to me because growing up I was forced to pursue piano and dance, which I didn't like so much. But then I got to do this whole other thing, and my mom came to my plays and stuff. It was super exciting. And
yeah, I believe you have to try. You have to try different things in order to find your real passion and something that you truly enjoy. For example, I'm doing comedy now. I would never think myself on the stage. I could not even imagine that. I was never a public speaker.
Yeah.
But then I'm really passionate about life. I like different things.
Yeah.
I like to trying out different activities. And then when I tried this one, it felt like it is something that. Yeah, it felt good. It felt good.
Yeah, so
it felt something
how
I
long
want
have
to
you
continue.
been doing comedy then?
Couple of years for now.
Nice. You're really freaking, oh my God. You're really funny.
Thank you. That's a good compliment for a comedian. Try my best. I truly enjoy it. And comedy is actually a very interesting type of art because it's the only art that can work only one time. You know, you can write a song and you can perform with the song for years. You can do tours, and there's some groups or singers who perform songs from like in 80s or 90s, and they're still singing them. A movie, you can watch 100 or billion times and still cry about it. But a good joke can only hit you one time. That's it. You might rewatch it, you might re-listen it. It might you might still get a giggle, but it's never gonna be as funny as the first time you hear it. Yes, that's. And there's a lot of things like this. I think also comedy boosts your confidence. This public speaking skill you can use in work. You can use it in your personal life.
You just got to try it. You just got to go out there and embrace the uncertainty and let the material out and see how it goes.
Right.
You don't know how it goes until you just attempt.
And it's also a very unique way of getting ready because, you know, someone is sitting in front of the computer for hours in front of the white paper waiting to the words come to their head. I'm like a crazy person walking around my house. I'm only walking. I cannot sit. I need to walk, and then I'm saying the material over again, and then eventually it comes.
Even when I'm like on the phone, like on a work call at my house, I'm pacing. I cannot sit. I don't.
Right. I mean, yeah, that's the imagination, you know, and this art influence. It comes, I don't know, from space or wherever to your head, and you never expect it to be in the right moment.
Yeah.
So okay, so you said in school you were learning the dramatology, right? But what about the major? Would you move to the university and then further?
Yeah. I see what you're doing, and you're setting us up for what we're about to talk about.
Yes, I was trying to make this transition as smooth as possible, but you caught me. You caught me.
Of course I did, but you know, I used to, you know, I filmed shit. Cut that out.
Okay.
So when I went to university, I wanted to major in international relations. I was dead set on being a diplomat. Super funny. Freshman year of high school, I did Model UN. I was like, oh my God, why I want to do this for the rest of my life. So that had been my goal. History was my favorite subject in high school. So I wanted to study international relations, but Berkeley didn't have that. So I had to study political science with a concentration, which I didn't even end up doing. Because that's what happens. You go to university, you're 18, you think what you know, you think you know what you want to do, and you see the world, and you're like, damn, I actually want to do that, or that, right? So
as just we discussed, and you don't know unless you tried it, right?
There's so much uncertainty. So I studied political science, which I did stick with. I chose the major, and I stuck with it, unlike some people.
Okay.
But,
So after you graduated, I will get straight to the point.
Okay.
I think it's super excited that you worked in DC.
I did.
And what was the first of all, what was the inspiration? Why you decide that I want to work for the government? How was it a random job you searched for and you saw the opportunity, or it was like, no, specifically I will look for it. That's what I'm doing it for. I want to do this impact. What was the idea behind it?
Yeah, so actually the things that springboarded me into working in DC post-graduation were college internships that were with the federal government in DC. So one was virtual, actually. I interned with the Department of State 1 year virtually, and then went one summer to DC to intern with the Department of Commerce in person. So when thinking about like a diplomacy career, that's usually thought of with the Department of State.
Mm-hmm.
So of course I wanted to intern at the Department of State, but everybody wants to intern at the Department of State.
Because that's the sweet spot.
That's where you think you need to go when
Mm-hmm.
you're 19 years old trying to get into diplomacy.
Mm-hmm.
But actually it's kind of interesting, but nobody on your podcast is going to care. There are a few different kinds of diplomacy pathways in the US government that don't all go through state.
Okay, tell us. We're educating people, and I'm actually getting educated too right now. So please tell me.
Yeah, so you might need to fact check this. As I recall it, you can be a diplomat with the State Department. There's different paths in that. And then you can be a diplomat with the Department of Commerce. You're a foreign commercial service diplomat. You could be a diplomat with the Department of Agriculture and sell farm goods.
Sorry to break up, but when you're a diplomat with all those departments, are you still considered as international connections to international relations to, or it's your own as well?
Yeah, I mean, typically, if you're a more specialized diplomat in like a not state department, you have some more education in whatever that topic area is. The State Department is people train for that specifically. So I got an internship with the Department of State with actually a Canadian embassy, which I think it's the U.S. Embassy in Toronto, was it? Yeah, I don't remember. This was years ago. And then I did the internship in DC that one summer. That was my first experience in DC and the International Trade Administration during the trade war. And then so having had those experiences plus my research was how I was able to get my job later on after graduation at my think tank.
I'm going to ask the most stereotypical question that everyone is who watching this or listening is curious. Have you been in a White House?
I have.
Tell us everything.
Okay. So
what was the moment? When was the moment when someone told you, hey, you know what? Tomorrow, 9:00, White House.
Okay, it's not that. Listen, Jay, it's not that exciting. Okay, I was an intern on a tour. Okay, it's not like I went to brief Melania. No.
Okay.
Like we weren't interns are not allowed anywhere near anybody important, right? So basically, the International Trade Administration, where I worked, had a really good partnership with the USTR, the U.S. Trade Representative. So these agencies, along with somebody from state, I think it was, collaborate on crafting U.S. policy responses on trade. Mm-hmm. And so Lucas, who was a contact we had at USTR, was like, hey, to my supervisor, hey, why don't we arrange a little tour of the White House for the interns? And we were all like, yay, because
okay, of
White
course.
House.
Yeah, of course.
But unfortunately, it wasn't the West Wing. It was the First Lady Wing, the East Wing. So I didn't actually see anybody. This was the Trump administration. My intern friend who came with me thought that she caught a glimpse of Melania Trump, but I was just walking around admiring the china and the curtains and the view. Wow.
Can you tell me more? So you said East Wing and West Wing,
yes,
right? And you said not in the East Wing. So all the Oval House and all the interesting stuff is in the East Wing.
West Wing.
West Wing.
So people here might know the American TV show, the pretty iconic political drama called The West Wing. That describes a wing of the White House where the president's office sits and the chief of staff and all that.
Right, that's the West
East Wing is the first lady's office.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Which I didn't know until I went on that tour. So,
okay,
we're
good.
really 普及一下大家, we're really giving everybody some information here.
Yeah. How did it look inside? Was it people was like looking? Because here's the thing. From the podcast I watched, some people said that when they entered, what surprised them that it's actually an office building. Yeah. There's actually people. There's one guy who said that he saw a lady working on the computer, and then she took her shoes off. Because when you work in the office,
I took my shoes off all the time when I was working. So my government building, the Department of Commerce, is decently close to the White House. It's somewhat walking distance, right? So unless like a dignitary came, like a deputy assistant secretary or above, I wasn't wearing my heels.
Okay.
I was always wearing my Birkenstocks. Like one time, actually, there was this like big biotech company that came to meet with our DAS, our boss, our deputy assistant secretary, and I went to the meeting wearing Birkenstocks. I forgot to change into my pink heels, which were extremely uncomfortable. So like literally, I had like like when I was working not in government at the think tank, which isn't government, it's like adjacent but not, like, I mean, I rarely ever even wore my work shoes. Like one time I had to escort like some foreign secretary of some country, and I was like, okay, finally, let me put my work shoes on. You know, like I hate like part of why I don't work in DC, the stuffy kind of governmental or government adjacent policy jobs anymore, is that I actually really hate business attire.
Oh, really?
Oh my goodness.
You're a freestyle worker, but
Yeah, listen, I put on this shirt to go on this podcast. Do you think
it's
I
a
look
beautiful shirt. This
I know,
is a beautiful
thanks,
shirt. I
Mom.
like it. I like it.
Yeah, but like I don't like I'm normally in a t-shirt and some jeans, like holding up a sign and a megaphone. Like that's my job now. I'm not like the like DC insider anymore, you know?
Okay, so there was a tour in the White House. They explained to you how everything works, the East Wing and everything. Have you seen anyone at that day? Was there any people? This it's more of a okay.
You know, I'm like, I'm not so observant.
Okay.
I love to talk, but I don't love to watch. I can't like take in a lot of information at once. So
Did you feel more present? You know, like, oh, okay, I'm in the room, I'm getting a tour and everything, or were you like, damn, I'm in White House? Was it that sort of excitement that you cannot get read from your head, or it was just
no. It's not the West Wing.
okay.
It's
It was
the,
not West enough for you. You will get more excited on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't very thrilled about the Trump administration, so the idea of running into the Trump first lady or Trump was not so exciting.
Okay. Before we move to that, what can you tell us about your work? Whatever you can tell. More even not about your duties, but in terms of, for example, workload. Because you know, I think it's a very important topic here because people working a lot.
Yeah, I learned a new word this visit. I learned two words actually, 躺平 and 卷.
Juan.
卷is the opposite of 躺平. 卷 is like if you're working extremely hard.
Oh, extremely hard.
Yeah.
Okay. And tangping is laying down and flat and doing almost nothing, right? Is that the meaning?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah, laying down flat. Right. So what was the workload for the government job in America? Was it normal now? Was this 9 to 5, Monday to Friday?
9 to 5.
Okay.
With the caveat that being an intern means they like some internships really vary across the government. Some of my friends who interned in Congress, especially if they interned with higher ranking Congress people, really got almost nothing out of that experience because they were just opening doors for tourists, really.
Okay.
Like big senators. Sometimes you get to write some policy papers and submit it up to your legislative assistant. Sometimes a lot of times, like in Congress, if you're doing an internship, you're literally just, your constituents come to visit the office and you're taking them on tours. It's not like internships in government are very rarely super glamorous, and they're usually quite boring and menial because they really expect you to work your way up.
Right.
Fortunately, I had bosses that were really invested in my having a good experience. So I got to write policy papers. I got to brief the like high level officials, like some briefings that I wrote eventually after my internship ended, made it all the way up to the Secretary of Commerce. Like I had an impact. I felt like I was sitting in on meetings with important people. Like I really learned a lot that summer. Like I learned a whole dictionary of references of how to work on trade policy in DC. It was great.
What was the best life lesson you took? And if we're not talking about obviously the work experience is extraordinary, and I think it's also for, let's be honest, for self-esteem, right? It is a very big point that you reached personally. You know, some things that I'm doing, sometimes I'm not even trying to get the actual benefit. It's just for my own sake that I'm able to do that. So I think being in the White House is one of those things. But what about any particular life lessons you took from being there and that you're still implementing in your life?
This isn't super life. This is more work. But
okay.
I think the one important thing that changed my life direction at that one internship in college at commerce was the importance of data. Just
The
like,
importance of data.
yeah, because trade is numbers. You look at flows between countries. You look at the goods, the categories of goods that are increasing or decreasing. You look at what's getting tariffed and when's that hitting.
Mhm.
You're putting that into charts, sending it up the chain. You have to be able to explain it. Like I understood more and more that just because I studied social sciences doesn't mean I can be content not having data literacy. So I went back and started taking more classes in that area.
Data is power. That's what we need here too for our
Yeah.
project here too.
Yeah.
Maybe the last question about your work, because when you're telling someone that you work for the government, people are immediately losing their mind because it is a work of mystery. Do you think there is a lot of people actually overthink about this kind of work, or it is the opposite way, or you think it's not understood enough and there's actually way more work that those people are doing that people don't actually realize? Because I'll be honest with you, I'm more of the first one. I think it is an important job. You need to be an extraordinary person to do that. But as I told you, I do believe it's a job. I think at one point it become a normal job as regular.
Yeah.
You're going to work and you're finishing and you're going home. Would you still say it's more misunderstood or undervalued?
So let me just clarify, making sure we all understand here. I
Okay.
never worked full time for the US government. I did internships.
Again, I clearly understand that.
Okay.
But you were as close as anyone I know. That's why I'm
Okay.
asking you
All
these
right.
questions.
Well, then,
because even if maybe you haven't done that, you still interacted and engaged
Yes,
with people
I
who
have.
are full time,
Yes.
who are going there on a regular basis, maybe for many years.
Mhm.
So you probably know just a little bit of the insights.
Yeah. So you're asking if you think these jobs are over.
Is it that mysterious as everyone think? Is it all about these top secrets agencies?
No. Okay, so not at all. I don't want the US, I don't want Uncle Sam to watch
Okay.
this and come for me
Okay.
and interrogate me when I go
Okay.
back to Border Patrol in the US. But
We're talking about normal people who has the
Yes.
job and who's doing this job every day.
so there's the intelligence community, the IC, which consists of the CIA, FBI, NSA, and a bunch of other agencies. Like there's a bunch that you don't think of as intelligence agencies, but they are like intelligence units of normal government bureaucracies. They safeguard shit. They safeguard their stuff pretty
Okay.
closely. They need top secret security clearances. They are the keepers of the US state, really, in a certain way. But keep in mind, the U.S. bureaucracy is huge. There's federal government, which we discussed. There's state government. There's city government. All levels of government have all different functions. It's just like any other government. People have to run things to get things to people, and kids got to get to school, and parents need to get their work benefits and taxes. It's a rather mundane operation. Only very select few people can actually hold
access to something.
to top secret information. I do think transparency could be improved, right? Because people think there's corruption or something. But an interesting statistic is that while Congress is extremely unpopular to average Americans, most Americans actually think bureaucrats, people who work within, civil servants who aren't partisan, who work within the system, are good people who are effective at their jobs. So you can't define this entire huge employer by
As
the IC, right? The
Right,
IC. When you think of the U.S. government, the federal level, people think the fancy.
But that's
shit,
exactly what I said when
the
people
IC.
think about the mystery, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly, they're thinking about the top secret department where actually I think there's a lot of normal people who just going to work and then coming back and they know nothing.
Yeah. Dude, the people I worked with are so normal. They have the normal snacks. They have their girlfriends and their kids and their books.
And
I
they're
don't know.
taking shoes off while they're sitting at the office.
Shit,
of the
everybody
computer.
nobody wears dress shoes when they're just walking around the office hallway. Everybody's got their tennies,
Right. Do you think that current
Wait, sorry, actually let me clarify. Department of
Yeah.
State, more serious. Commerce, it varies by department. State is super formal, is what I don't know. I never worked personally at in person, but I don't know. I can't speak for the entire U.S. government when I say nobody wears their shoes.
Okay, we don't expect you to do that, but you still gave us a lot of good information to think about.
Yeah.
I think you touched a lot on the bureaucracy that's happening. Do you think the current election and the current situation in states would change that?
The bureaucracy?
And the bureaucracy as well.
Did you say democracy or
Bureaucracy.
Oh, well, I've heard that Donald Trump, President-elect Trump, plans to cut the bureaucracy significantly, that he thinks is too bloated. Republicans tend to think that, but don't tend to take as drastic actions because it's people's livelihoods. And there's...
But he did announce that. Have you seen his big announcement where he's saying that all these federal agencies, they're all going to be cut off as soon as he get to the office?
Yeah, and that he's going to appoint Elon Musk to be the head of a new department called Government Efficiency. Right. So he's serious about this, I think, but I actually don't know to what extent that kind of thing requires congressional approval. And I don't know to what extent the Republicans will be as obedient to him as they were in his first term.
But you think they're going to be less obedient or more obedient? Because now actually the situation is completely different, right? Because now, first of all, I think that Democrats had a huge loss because the upper house, the lower house, everything.
It was a bloodbath, yeah.
And now he has the control to put the people in charge who he wants to put. And as I think you're following for sure, the choices that he's doing right now is not even based on how professional they are, but how loyal they are.
Yeah,
because last time it played the wrong game with him, and that's what he actually explicitly said, that last time, my biggest mistake in my last term, I chose the wrong people.
Yeah, now whereas before he was kind of an outsider businessman, no political experience, kind of coming in with his sort of more haphazard set of ideas and picking whatever people he could at them, people who advisors suggested to him. He picked, just look at his VP pick, right? The first time he ran, he picked Pence. He picked Mike Pence, governor of Indiana, because he thought he had to appeal to a more traditional, not even moderate, evangelical conservative constituency. But in the last 8 years, he's completely built his own brand, his own coalition that he didn't care. He picked J.D. Vance, who only advances this very same agenda that he proposes, right? So he, at this point, has kind of conglomerated ideas and people around him to support his worldview in a way that was not true in his first term. And his, he's going to pick Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. Like, every time I refresh the news and I see who he's who he's announced as his next Secretary of something, my heart just, this is not good for my blood pressure,
Why do you think, what was the major issue that leads for Democrats to lose as tough as they did?
You saw me that Thursday. I was emotional. Wow. So the caveat to this answer is that I really haven't followed U.S. news at all pretty much since I've been here. Whatever I know is what my friends texted me. It's not like I'm just refreshing and reading all that U.S. media. So my take is more just conjectures. It's not necessarily this is a verified take from somebody who is an insider of this game. I've just been observing and part of the political game in the U.S. for the last 8 years in the campaign capacity, the federal capacity, the community advocacy organizing capacity, so that I have as someone who's
consistently of what's going on,
who's been consistently a Democrat, I have some opinions of the last 2 or 3 election cycles. Some people would say, I don't fully have information enough to decide for myself at this moment, but some people would say that the Democrats ran to the left too much, that they didn't concede enough to appeal enough to the moderate independent voter, especially when it came to economic issues. Kamala Harris did not articulate as coherent of a vision of how to improve material conditions as Trump's, big campaign promises seemed to promise. And people had an association of Harris with Biden, who had a terrible economic 4 years with the inflation
and the main question was if she can do it, why she haven't done it before while she was in the House?
She failed to articulate a brand that is separate and fresh from the Biden brand, which was getting toxic, and his approval ratings were super, super low, right? But she had this problem where she couldn't necessarily go her own way and just really flagrantly rebuild a brand because she had to be loyal to her president, her boss, you know?
Right.
So,
But it was a major issue for her because she was saying that Biden is sharp as a tack and she cannot keep up with him. And then after they switch him and she replaced him, this is obviously proving a lie. This is obviously proving a lie. And no matter what's going to happen after, it's not a good start.
it's not enough time to campaign, really. She started in late July or August or something like that. Like, 3 months is not enough for the American people to know even a well-known candidate. Like, she's not. Trump has been president once. He was in the news for 4 straight years, and he's very good at firebrand sound bites. He's very good at branding and marketing. And so,
Have you seen
who's
him?
Kamala Harris? You know,
Have you seen him on Joe Rogan?
I don't really. No.
Okay, I was just saying it was impressive. It was impressive
Yes.
that a man of his age with his kind of work can keep up for 3 hours of conversation.
Damn, do you watch all 3 hours?
Stop. I watched all 3 hours, honestly
can't do
speaking.
it.
It is fascinating. It is fascinating that someone is able to do that. And as you said, articulate and through the fireballs and all that kind of stuff and actually leading conversation to where he wants it to be.
Yeah.
That's a skill to do.
That's actually another podcasting and alternative media. That's actually another story that can be told about this election is that conservatives, right wingers have Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson. They have media personalities and an entire network of media forms and sources that they know, trust, and love. The left doesn't really have as much of that. There's Democracy Now!
But again, it's a transition, right? They did have them. They did it. The whole Hollywood and there was
But
a lot of.
we're making a distinction. That's liberal. That's not left. Liberal
Okay.
media and left media are two different
Okay.
things. We're talking
Okay,
about the
you're
far
right.
right and the far left.
Right,
The far
you're
left
right.
doesn't have the same media infrastructure as the far right and the same marketing bravados, I guess.
Agree. And
Yeah.
however, they still tried. That Kamala went on the Call Her Daddy podcast. I didn't see any proof data, but they're saying that she spent $1 million for that. And that's outrageous. And actually, a lot of actions that she did, it just seemed, I'm trying to be neutral because I'm not living in the country, right? I'm definitely watching it from both perspectives. I'm trying to understand the truth for myself too. But for me, the biggest thing was when they knew that they about to lose and when they lost actually already, she didn't even have the decency to walk out and to speak to the
Speaking
people.
of Howard, yeah.
For people who put their money, who put their vote, who put their effort in voting for her, and she didn't even have the decency to just walk out and just say something. It just shows that.
I think I see what you mean, but I'll just say this, Jay. Like, I know people who have worked for and did work this year on the Harris campaign, and none of them have said anything negative about Kamala Harris to me. I don't know her. I've seen her a few times, like at a convention or something. Like, I've never met her, right? But so I cannot comment on that. But usually,
But what's your personal opinion
of Kamala Harris?
Yes.
I'm inclined to like her for a couple of reasons. She came out of San Francisco politics. She was a prosecutor in San Francisco. She made her way into California politics and national politics from my quote unquote current home, right? So I have a familiarity to her. She's also mixed. She's Black and South Asian. She has an immigrant family background. There's a lot of reasons why I can relate to somebody like Kamala Harris, even though clearly she's like a national politician. I'm some small cog in the machine talking to you on this podcast. But her brand didn't seem to have worked I don't know, the American people didn't understand who she was or what she
actually
stood for. Or maybe what she thought would come across as articulated values that people would pick up on no longer resonate with people. I read this article that said the Obama coalition is over. Maybe she was trying to appeal to some degree of multiculturalism and that entire idea that people are what? I care about
right.
my bread and butter,
But it is making sense, and I also agree that they went too far left, and
I don't know.
there's
Okay,
the
here's
whole
thing.
new
I don't want to
generation.
interrupt you,
Right, of course.
That's one story. That's the mainstream liberal story, is that they went too far left. They appealed to, they made too many concessions to the left wing of the party. But some actually argue that, one, they didn't make enough, and that's how they lost a swing state. And two, that they have abandoned, if if the story they take away from this is that they went too far left, they will be abandoning issues that are worthy of persuasion. So one such argument is that because she didn't appeal more to the concerns of Palestinians and she didn't break with Biden on that policy, she lost pockets of Michigan, which are heavily Arab American.
Have you heard about that? The fact that the Democrats now are pushing this idea that America should have open borders, that the immigrants that are coming into country are being moved to the swing states, and that's are the potential votes.
No, I haven't heard that. Where did you get that?
I haven't seen any statistics, and honestly speaking, I even tried to find it, but I heard this idea many times, and it is making sense because we all did see those pictures of millions of people are standing at the border. However, the Kamala administration still obviously don't want to do anything about it. They think that that's, even though they try to address this issue because they see that there is something going on.
Yeah, they cost them the election, really.
Right.
Yeah. Trump ran on the economy and immigration, and voters loved it. So,
as I think I can ask you this question because you're an American citizen. Who would you vote for?
If I were, who did I vote for?
Yeah. Or did you vote?
I did.
Oh,
absolutely.
okay.
I voted the day before the election because, as you might know, I flew on election day.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I flew at 11 p.m. on election day. I was refreshing the results, anxiously sitting at the gate waiting for my flight. And by the time I left, Trump had 267 votes, and you only need 270 to win. So I was like, okay. But I voted for Kamala Harris, and I will not hesitate to tell anyone that.
Can you, if you can you tell us why? Because from what you just said, you said people were not get familiar with her enough, and you're saying that yes, I personally can connect myself to her more, right? You said that she's also a mixed culture, and she's been a prosecutor and everything. But what about the actual? Because again, you said that people are carry about bread and butter, right? That's actually a good expression. But don't you think
that American bread and butter, or is that like general English?
I think it's general English.
Okay,
yeah.
I never know whether the things I say are American English or general English.
But it's a good expression. I'll steal it from
All
you.
right.
But don't you think that those things are the most important? Because it doesn't matter actually of what her skin color is and what she resonates is, but what's the actual...
She ran a campaign that largely did not emphasize her womanhood or her person of color identity.
Right. But what do you think? You think that Trump administration now will make any difference, or you think there's not much chance to it? Because
on the
again,
border or in general?
In general, because a lot of the ideas, from what I heard from people, they're saying, "Oh, we're voting for Kamala just because we want to vote against Trump."
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you had the Cheneys coming out for her, like Liz Cheney was out stumping for her, which when you're building a coalition that's as broad as Liz Cheney to Elizabeth Warren, like there's some fragility to that coalition. You know, you're not really building a coalition on very concrete ideas. You're building a coalition that's like, this guy is dangerous, let's vote him out.
But they're the warmongers. I still have no idea why she was endorsing. Am I getting it wrong? Or she was endorsing Liz Cheney, right?
Liz Cheney was endorsing Kamala. I'm not sure if there was another
way. Okay,
yeah.
I'm not. But I also heard about their connection too. But you know what was my favorite moment of this whole thing?
Yeah.
I think it happened a couple of days ago when they were transitioning with when Trump met with Biden.
Yes.
Have you seen that?
No.
And Biden has such a huge smile. He's so happy. He's so happy. He looks so, he's like, I wish we can put this picture here. It's so weird. And he talks about, oh, it's a smooth transition. We're going to do it respectfully. You know, I thought Trump is a Nazi. He was going so rough on him. And now seeing them in the same room, and Trump definitely didn't seem happy. He seemed like, okay, let's, this is the working moment. Let's finish with it. But
Joe likes to smile, baby.
Yeah, he looked so happy. It was insane.
I feel like Joe was happy to be done.
Yeah, I think so. At one point. I mean, he have to get up with his job, but he
ran for president like 3-4 times. The man wants to be president,
right.
and he finally. Like that's why I think he was so unable to let go when he was being pushed out and couldn't run for his second term anymore, because he had endeavored since, I think the first time he ran was like the 80s or the 90s. He's been senator from Delaware forever, and then he was vice president, and then like Joe's actually had a pretty extraordinary political career.
It's interesting how we as the society we have this choice where we put one person to act for the most important job that ever existed, and he is a human. He has this thing what you just said. I think it's fascinating that actually a person who just tried to be a president for such a long time, when he gets it, he just cannot let it go anymore. Because I think it was one of the mistakes that Democrats did of putting Biden in the first place.
I agree.
Putting Biden in the first place,
I think most Democrats would say that, yeah.
Was already a mistake, and that's where they could not fix it, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's a devastating loss. Like, it's very unanticipated. So I was in a lot of election response trainings because of my job. Mm-hmm. And they were all saying it's going to be weeks. They're not going to call it very soon. Be prepared to assure your people in your communities to stay calm. But I had this gut feeling. I was like, this thing is going to get finished in like 48 hours. It is not going to be close. And and it wasn't. He won all 7 swing states.
Yeah. It's a new era, I think. It's a new era. What's happening now in America, Europe, the same story. I think I'm really feel bad for Germany, because they're going to have re-elections, which actually a big thing. Germany is the biggest economy of Europe. And it happened that their government fell apart exactly at the moment of American elections, and no one noticed it.
I did not notice it.
No one noticed
Thank you for
it.
bringing it up.
They're gonna have new elections in like a couple of months. And
super cool.
Cool is
I don't know.
Cool is
I'm just riffing.
Cool is the very interesting word, but
at least
we will
they
see.
have free and fair election.
Right. We're gonna see what's gonna happen there. But it is definitely a new era, and we're gonna navigate as much as we can in it.
Yeah.
So Jen, the last thing we do here, called Say It Fast. I'm gonna ask you a series of questions. You need to tell me the first answer that pops in your head. You ready?
Yeah.
Time travel to the past or to the future?
Past.
iPhone or Huawei?
iPhone.
Have you ever lied to avoid a long family dinner?
Definitely.
Have you ever broken the law?
Yeah.
Freedom of choice or freedom of speech?
Speech.
Why the grass is green?
It just is.
Stuck in the traffic or stuck in a room with boring people?
Traffic.
How old you will be in 2036?
37.
Teleport or read people's mind?
Read.
And the last one. What is the purpose of life?
For me.
For you.
It's to have as many interesting experiences, variety of them as possible, so that I have the wisdom and the thoughts to make choices wisely. I said that so badly. Please let me rephrase. It's just, I would like to have as many interesting and very diverse experiences as possible, so I'm like a fun, wise person.
It is a beautiful answer. Jen, thank you for joining us. It was an amazing conversation.
Let's go. Woo!